A blind man goes to Texas. He feels the bus seat in Texas and says, "This seat is huge." "Everything's bigger in Texas," the bus driver says. "Have a seat." So the blind man sits down, and the bus arrives at a bar later on. The guy gets off and goes inside. When he sits down, the bartender pours him a glass. The blind man feels it and says, "This glass is humongous." "Everything is bigger in Texas," the bartender replies. A few minutes pass and the blind guy is hammered. He asks the bartender where the restroom is. "It's the third door on your right down that hallway to the left of you," the bartender replies, and the blind man gets up and advances toward the bathroom. Along the way, he trips over a fan cord and as a result, he oversteps and goes out the fourth door instead. He falls into the club swimming pool, and the whole time he's standing in water up to his chest, he's screaming, "Don't flush! Don't flush! Please, God, no." Doctor to female patient. "You are looking so weak and exhausted. Are you taking the 3 meals a day as I had advised you?" Female patient. "Oh my God, your nurse wrote 3 meals a day?" A girl asked her mom, "Mom, may I take the dog for a walk around the block?" Mom replies, "No, because she is in heat." "What's that mean?" asked the child. "Go ask your father. I think he's in the garage." The girl goes to the garage and says, "Dad, may I take Belle for a walk around the block?" I asked Mom, but she said the dog was in heat and to come to you. Dad said, "Bring Belle over here." Being old school, he took a rag, soaked it with a little gasoline, and dabbed the dog's backside with it to disguise the scent and said, "Okay, you can, go now. But keep Belle on the leash and only go one time round the block." The girl left and returned a few minutes later with no dog on the leash. Surprised, Dad asked, "Where's Belle?" "You're gonna love this." The girl said she ran out of gas about halfway down the block, so another dog is pushing her home. 2 old men were sitting in the park, playing a casual dice game on a rickety table, each tossing in a few crumpled bills to keep things interesting. Just as one was about to roll, a stunning blonde walked up, eyes gleaming. "Mind if I join?" she asked, placing a fat stack of cash on the table. Before they could even respond, she smirked. "I feel luckier when I'm naked." Without hesitation, she undresses, grabs the dice, and yells, "Come on, baby, Mama needs new clothes." The dice tumbled across the table, finally coming to a stop. She clapped her hands, jumped in excitement, and squealed, "Yes! I won! I won!" With a wide grin, she swept up the entire pile of cash, gave each old man a hug, grabbed her clothes, and strutted away, leaving them stunned. For a long moment, silence. Then one of the old men leaned forward and whispered, "What did she roll?" The other scratched his head. "No idea." "I thought you were watching still stunned." They watched her disappear into the park. Then, after a moment, one of the old men grinned and stood up. "I'll be right back." Curious, his friend watched as he followed after her, catching up just as she finished buttoning her blouse. "You know," he said with a smirk, "I can tell a woman's exact age just by fondling her breasts." She laughed. "Oh, really?" "No way. Go ahead and try Grandpa." With a mischievous grin, Grandpa gently fondled her for a few moments, then stepped back. "Well?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "How old am I?" The old man grinned. "Yesterday." This wealthy couple are employing a housemaid. She decides to ask for a raise. She goes to the lady and asks, "Ma'am, I'd like a raise." The lady responds, "A raise? But why on earth? I see no reason why." The housemaid says, "Well, for starters, I cook better than you, ma'am." The lady gets annoyed and replies, "Where does that come from?" "Well, ma'am, your husband told me he likes the food better when I make it than when you do." Seriously annoyed, the lady interjects, "I'm not giving you a raise." "That's just your job." The housemaid tries again. And I'm sorry, ma'am, but I'm also better at laundry than you. Nonsense. What makes you think that? Again, I'm sorry, ma'am, but your husband says his shirts are better ironed when I'm the one who cleaned them than when you are. Even more annoyed, the lady says, Okay, I'll have a talk with him. But you're still not getting a raise for doing your job. Well, I'm very sorry, ma'am, but maybe you should also consider the fact that I'm better at sex than you. The lady responds, red with anger, Excuse me? My husband told you that? The housemaid answers, Oh, no. The gardener, ma'am. The phone bill was exceptionally high. The man of the house called a family meeting to discuss. Dad, this is unacceptable. I don't use the home phone. I use my work phone. Mom, me too. I hardly use the home phone. I use my company's phone. Son, I use the cell phone given to me by my office. I never use the home phone. All of them shocked and together look at the maid who was patiently listening to them. Maid, what? So we all use our work phones? What's the big deal? A patient complained to a doctor that he wetted his bed every night. Before it happens, do you see any dream? The doctor said. Yes, doctor. Usually I see a dream in which a small demon comes and says, Let's pee. Okay, the doctor said. Next time you see the demon, say, No, we've already peed. Next time the patient came to the doctor, the latter asked, So? Did you do as I said? Yes, I did. Did it help? Yes, doctor, only it made the matter worse. How? As I said, we've already peed. The demon nodded and said, Then let's shit a little. John O'Reilly hoisted his beer and said, Here's to spending the rest of me life between the legs of me wife. That won him the top prize at the pub for the best toast of the night. He went home and told his wife Mary, I won the prize for the best toast of the night. She said, Aye, did you now? And what was your toast? John said, Here's to spending the rest of me life, sitting in church beside me. Wife? Oh, that is very nice indeed, John, Mary said. The next day, Mary ran into one of John's drinking buddies on the street corner. The man chuckled leeringly and said, John won the prize the other night at the pub with a toast about you, Mary. She said, Aye, he told me, and I was a bit surprised myself. You know, he's only been there twice in the last 4 years. Once he fell asleep, and the other time I had to pull him by the ears to make him come. A man and his young wife were in divorce court, but the custody of their children posed a problem. The mother gets up and says to the judge that since she brought the children into this world, she should retain custody of them. The man also wanted custody of his children, so the judge asked for his justification. After a long silence, the man slowly rose from his chair and replied, Your Honor, when I put $1 in a vending machine and a Coke comes out, does the Coke belong to me or the machine? An Irishman, an Englishman, and a Scotsman were sitting in a bar in Sydney. The view was fantastic, the beer was excellent, and the food was exceptional. But, said the Scotsman, I still prefer the pubs back home. Why, in Glasgow, there's a little bar called McTavish's. The landlord there goes out of his way for the locals. When you buy 4 drinks, he will buy the 5th drink for you. Well, said the Englishman, at my local, the Red Lion, the barman there will buy your 3rd drink after you buy the first 2. Ah, that's nothing, said the Irishman. Back home in Dublin, there's Ryan's Bar. Now, the moment you set foot in the place, they'll buy you a drink, then another, all the drinks you like. When you've had enough to drink, they'll take you upstairs and see that you get laid. Several times, all on the house. The Englishman and Scotsman immediately pour scorn on the Irishman's claims. He swears every word is true. Well, said the Englishman, did this actually happen to you? Not myself personally, no, said the Irishman. But it did happen to my sister. A young banker decided it was time to upgrade his wardrobe and get his very first tailor-made suit. He went to the finest tailor in town, got measured, and a week later came back for his first fitting. As soon as he slipped on the suit, he looked sharp, like a man ready to take on Wall Street. Standing in front of the mirror, he admired the perfect fit, the crisp lines, and the confidence it gave him. But as he reached down to slide his hands into the pockets, he paused. There weren't any. Puzzled, he turned to the tailor and said, "Excuse me, but this suit doesn't have any pockets." The tailor raised an eyebrow and replied, "Didn't you tell me you were a banker?" The young man nodded. "Yes, I did." The tailor smiled and said, "Well then, who's ever heard of a banker with his hands in his own pockets?" A nurse was on duty in the emergency room when a young woman with purple hair styled into a punk rocker mohawk, sporting a variety of tattoos and wearing strange clothing, entered the ER. It was quickly determined that the patient had acute appendicitis, so she was scheduled for immediate surgery. When she was completely disrobed on the operating table, the staff noticed that her pubic hair had been dyed green, and above it there was a tattoo that read, "Keep off the grass." Once the surgery was completed, the surgeon wrote a short note on the patient's dressing which said, "Sorry, had to mow the lawn." There was a Japanese man who went to America for sightseeing. On the last day, he hailed a cab and told the driver to drive to the airport. During the journey, a Honda drove past the taxi. Thereupon, the man leaned out of the window excitedly and yelled, "Honda, very fast! Made in Japan!" After a while, a Toyota sped past the taxi. Again, the Japanese man leaned out of the window and yelled, "Toyota, very fast! Made in Japan." And then a Mitsubishi sped past the taxi. For the third time, the Japanese leaned out of the window and yelled, "Mitsubishi, very fast! Made in Japan." The driver was a little angry, but he kept quiet. And this went on for quite a number of cars. Finally, the taxi came to the airport. The fare was $150. The Japanese exclaimed, "Wah, so expensive!" Thereupon, the driver yelled back, "Meter, very fast! Made in Japan!" A kindergarten teacher handed out a coloring page of a duck holding an umbrella. "Color the duck yellow and the umbrella green," she instructed. Johnny, ever the rebel, colored the duck bright fire truck red. The teacher walked over and asked, "Johnny, how many times have you seen a red duck?" Johnny grinned and replied, "Same number of times I've seen a duck holding an umbrella." Husband and wife. Before marriage. Husband. Ah. At last, I can hardly wait. Wife. Do you want me to leave? Husband. No, don't even think about it. Wife. Do you love me? Husband. Of course, always have and always will. Wife. Have you ever cheated on me? Husband. No, why are you even asking? Wife. Will you kiss me? Husband. Every chance I get. Wife. Will you hit me? Husband. Hell no, are you crazy? Wife. Can I trust you? Husband. Yes. Wife. Darling. After marriage, read from bottom to top. The husband and his young wife were not on good terms. In fact, the wife was convinced that he was carrying on with the pretty housemaid, so she laid a trap. One evening, she suddenly sent the maid home for the weekend and didn't inform the husband. That night, when they went to bed, the husband gave the old story, "Excuse me, my dear. My stomach," and disappeared towards the bathroom. The wife promptly dashed along the corridor, up the back stairs and into the maid's bed. She just had time to switch the lights off when he came in silently. He wasted no time or words but got on top of her and her like there was no tomorrow. When he finished, and while he was still panting, the wife said, "You didn't fucking expect to find me in this bed, did you?" and switched on the light. "No, madam," said the gardener. A man was about to enter a bar when he was approached by a nun waving a total abstinence banner. "Don't go in there," she said. "Alcohol is the devil's work." "But I just want 1 pint. It's been a tough day and I need to unwind." "No, you mustn't. No good will come of drinking alcohol." "Have you ever tried it?" the man asked. "No, certainly not." "Well, perhaps you should try it just once. I'll get you a drink, and if you don't like it, fine, but at least you'll know what you're talking about." "Well, all right," said the nun. "Just get me 1 small drink." "What do respectable ladies generally drink?" "How about gin?" the man suggested. The nun thought for a moment. "In that case, get me 1 gin, but put it in a cup so people won't know I'm drinking alcohol." The man walked into the bar and said to the barman, "A pint of bitter and a small gin, please, and can you put the gin in a cup?" "Oh, no," said the barman. "Is that bloody nun there again?" Bert, at 85 years old, always wanted a pair of soft spike golf shoes like Freddie Couples, so, seeing some on sale after his round, he bought them. He was so delighted with his purchase, he decided to wear them home to show the missus. Walking proudly into the house, he sauntered into the kitchen and said to his wife, "Notice anything different about me?" Margaret, at age 83, looked him over and replied, "Nope." Frustrated, Bert stormed off into the bathroom, undressed, and walked back into the kitchen completely naked except for the new golf shoes. Again, he asked Margaret, a little louder this time, "Notice anything different now?" Margaret looked up and said in her best deadpan response, "Bert, what's different? It's hanging down today. It was hanging down yesterday, and it'll be hanging down again tomorrow." Furious, Bert yells out, "And do you know why it's hanging down, Margaret?" "Nope, not a clue," she replied. "It's hanging down because it's looking at my new golf shoes." Without missing a beat, old Margaret replies, "You should have bought a new hat." A woman decides to treat herself to a facelift for her 50th birthday, spending $15,000. The results are fantastic, and she looks amazing. On her way home, she stops at a newsstand to buy a newspaper. As she leaves, she asks the clerk, "How old do you think I am?" "About 32, he replies. "Wrong. I'm actually 50, she says, beaming with pride. Feeling great, she heads to McDonald's and asks the counter girl the same question. The girl responds, "Maybe 29. "Wrong again." "I'm 50, the woman says with a grin. Now, really feeling good about herself, she stops at a candy store and asks the clerk the same question. The clerk says, "Oh, I'd say 30. "Wrong again. "I'm 50, but thank you," she replies proudly. Later, while waiting for the bus, she strikes up a conversation with an elderly man sitting next to her and asks him the same question. He responds, "Lady, I'm 78, and my eyesight isn't what it used to be, but when I was young, there was a way to tell a woman's age with absolute certainty. It may sound a little forward, but it involves feeling for a few things." Curious, she decides to humor him. She says, "What the heck, go ahead." The man gently touches her arm and examines her face with careful attention. After a moment, he smiles and says, "Madam, you are 50. Amazed, she exclaims, "That's incredible. How could you tell?" He smiles and replies, "I was behind you at McDonald's." 3 men are applying for a position as a police detective. They are all being interviewed on the same day. The chief calls in the first applicant and says, "Before we hire you, you have to pass a little test. I'm going to show you a photograph of a suspect. You tell me something about them based on their photo." So the chief hands the first applicant a photo. The applicant studies it for a moment, then says, "Easy. The suspect only has one eye. The chief, puzzled, looks at the photo, then says, "Are you crazy? This is a profile picture. Of course you can only see one of his eyes. Get out of here." So the chief calls in the second applicant and gives him the same photo. The applicant says, "The suspect only has one ear." The chief blows up. "Has nobody ever heard of a profile picture? Get out of here." He calls in the third applicant and says, "Now, before you say anything, I want you to think very carefully. What can you tell me about this suspect?" The third applicant studies the photo intensely for a few moments, then says, "This man wears contact lenses." The chief is taken aback. He excuses himself and goes to look at the suspect's file, where he is pleasantly surprised to discover that the suspect does wear contact lenses. He returns to the interview room and says, "You're right. But how could you tell from this photo that the suspect wears contact lenses?" The applicant replies, "Well, he can't wear regular glasses since he only has one eye and one ear." A guy dies and goes to hell and meets Satan. Satan says to the man, "Nowadays, people entering hell are able to choose their own personal hell. I will take you to a series of doors and you will look inside and tell me if that is where you would like to spend eternity." Satan opens the first door. The man looks inside and sees thousands of people standing on their heads on a hardwood floor. The man says, "This looks too uncomfortable. Show me the next room, please." Satan then walks the man down to the second door. The man looks inside and sees thousands of people standing on their heads on a concrete floor. The man says, "This is even worse. Please show me the next room." Satan nods and takes him to the third door. The man looks inside, sees thousands of people standing knee-deep in liquid, all drinking coffee. The man says, "This is the place for me." Satan says, "Are you sure? Once the door closes, you can never go back." The man says, "I'm positive. I do love coffee." The man steps in and Satan closes the door. Just before the man could get comfortable, a voice on the loudspeaker says, "Coffee break is over. Back on your heads!"